Good morning. I call this meeting of the Mission Fulfillment Committee to order. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here in the boardroom or via live stream video. I'd like to welcome our student representatives, Sia Buttar from the Twin Cities, she's a medical student, and Bridget Amoa from Rochester. Welcome. Thank you for being here, and let's go to our agenda. First up is the Collegiate Strategic Plan alignment with MPAC for the Twin Cities here. And we'll be joined by Dean Valerie Forbes and Dean Keith Mays. And as they come up, and before I turn it over to them, President Gable and Provost Croson will provide some introductory comments. President Gable, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Vice Chair Johnson and members of the committee. A year ago, at the February 2021 meeting, the board approved the measures and metrics for MPAC 2025. And then at the December meeting that we recently had, the university's accountability report was presented for review, which tracks progress for year one of the plan, and then also represents all of the different work streams and system engagement that's happening across our faculty, across the staff, across all levels of students, as well as alums, supporters, partners in the legislature and around the state, all coming together to move the university forward and to drive world-class outcomes for the state of Minnesota and beyond. Beginning last spring and running regularly from board meetings from March to July, our chancellors presented their strategic plans and how they aligned to MPAC 2025 and briefed you on those strategies and showed you some of their outcomes. And in a similar spirit today, you're going to start to hear about how the Twin Cities deans have aligned their existing collegiate activities with MPAC 2025. The goal is not for them to become full-on subsidiaries of the strategic plan. They have unique attributes that we want them to lean into, but we want to see how it all comes together and then feeds up into shared goals and outcomes. So in particular, you'll hear an overview of the process for identifying system-wide metrics that are relevant to each college, and then how they've integrated them into budgeting or activities, as well as examples with how this works across two very different colleges, one that's undergraduate admitting and one that is a professional school. So of course we have the provost today, executive vice president and provost. We have Dean Valerie Forbes of the Dean of the College of Biological Sciences and Dean Keith Mays, the Dean of the School of Dentistry, who I believe is presenting for the first time to the board. So lucky you, Dean Mays. So before I turn it over to Provost Croson to continue the presentation, I will take just a moment to express our great appreciation for the work that has already happened and that is happening. This is a big lift. Most of these deans had their own strategic plans and we're moving along just fine. And we've asked them to pivot pretty abruptly to look at how everything lines up with MPAC 2025. But it really is giving us a platform to talk about our shared accomplishments and shared opportunities. And so I just want to say thank you. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back.
Great. And welcome, Dean Mays, and welcome back, Dean Forbes and Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, members of the board, President Gable. You've heard quite a lot about the system-wide strategic plan over the past year or two. You've received presentations from chancellors, as President Gable mentioned, as they describe their own campus plans and how these will be aligned with the system plan. Because the Twin Cities campus is so large and diverse, we wanted to provide you with an overview of how the system-wide strategic plan is being operationalized at the collegiate level. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall strategy, and then we're going to hear from two examples from very different kinds of colleges. You can go to the next slide. So the actions taken by colleges and schools on the Twin Cities campus will determine our success on many elements of the strategic plan. For example, to achieve our goals for 4-year and 6-year graduation rates, colleges and schools must evaluate and update curriculum, allocate resources toward course offering, advising, and tutoring, and take other measures to advance student success. As I repeatedly tell the deans, the provost office doesn't graduate any students. you graduate students. The same could be said about many or perhaps all of the commitments and metrics in the strategic plan. Furthermore, each college and school has their own characteristics that will enable them to contribute to the strategic plan in different ways. For example, undergraduate colleges will be expected to take actions to meet goals around student success. Professional schools have developed their own goals around graduation rates and time to degree, but those actions won't have the same level of impact on 4-year and 6-year graduation rates for undergraduates. Similarly, some units include disciplines that are typically externally funded and will expect those units to make greater contributions to our goals around research funding. Other units include disciplines that contribute heavily to community engagement, and we'll expect those units to make greater contributions to those goals. And extension, which is almost exclusively focused on outreach, will be making even more significant contributions in that area. My philosophy is that everyone contributes, but the dimensions on which they contribute and the amounts that are reasonable to expect, given their uniqueness, will be different. While the deans are the executive officers with responsibility for their units, I do want to note the pivotal role that vice provosts will play in this process. They are responsible for overseeing campus-wide progress toward our goals, identifying policies and processes that might contribute or inhibit us achieving our metrics, and they have robust infrastructure that supports the deans and the associate deans across the campus. As is appropriate, given the oversight role of the Board of Regents, you will mostly be hearing from our vice provosts as we continue to update you about progress along our metrics. But in this presentation, I wanted to give you a peek under the hood to show you the sausage making that will go into those university-wide presentations that you will later see. Go to the next slide. So once the strategic plan was approved by the board, the first step was to identify which metrics were relevant to colleges and schools. There are some metrics that are clearly in the domain of central administration. For example, updating the physical master plan on each campus. There are other metrics where units could contribute, but where the main activity and tracking will happen centrally. For example, achieving the Carnegie Community Engagement designation on all 5 of our campuses. And then there are other metrics which are directly relevant to and housed within each unit. So in the spring 2021 budget cycle, previous spring, we asked each dean to submit a completed spreadsheet like the one in your docket. It included some pre-populated data on each unit's current metrics and asked for next year's goals and a short description of the initiatives underway in order to achieve those goals. What we got was, unsurprisingly, a little messy. Not all the metrics were appropriate for all the units. Some units set goals that were unachievable. Other units set goals that were really projections rather than aspirational. But this exercise provided us with an important starting place for our efforts. So this past fall, I met with each dean and their leadership team to review their spreadsheets. In that meeting, we customized each of the spreadsheets with metrics that were relevant to each unit. So some were added, some were subtracted. For example, for professional schools, we replaced undergraduate metrics with their own goals for graduation time for their own populations. Overall, after that meeting, we see about 80% of the measures that are consistent across all of the units, with about 20% of the measures in each unit being customized for that unit, and with a cluster around undergraduate serving colleges and a different cluster around professional schools. The deans were also able to add additional metrics that weren't reflected in the impact list, but were critical to that unit's success, like clinical revenues, discipline-specific rankings, or departmental structures. In addition to identifying which metrics they would be tracking, we together calibrated the level of each goal to ensure that they were aspirational but attainable for each unit, and that when combined, they would enable us to reach our university-wide goals. So now that we have these metrics and these levels identified for each college, they will be submitting updated spreadsheets in the spring 2022 budget cycle, and will be using this information in budgetary and planning decisions. I want to stress that this information will be used in a nuanced and a nonlinear way. We clearly can't be in a world where if a unit achieves its goals, they get more money, and if they don't, they get less, because it might be a lack of resources that's preventing them from achieving their goals. Similarly, we can't have units that fail to meet their goals getting more money, and those that succeed getting less. That sets up the absolute inverse incentive of what we're trying to achieve. So we're going to be focusing on the why behind the progress that's being made. And we'll use that to guide our allocations toward the different colleges and schools moving forward. In addition, we're going to expect that any request for additional resources be tightly tied to these metrics and these initiatives that they're proposing in order to make sure we're directing resources to achieving our goals. Finally, progress toward these metrics will be an important input to the dean's annual reviews and comprehensive reviews moving forward. So that's a little about the process that we followed and where we are. But to put this a little into more concrete terms, I've asked two deans to join me today to talk about how this process is played out in their units. So Chair Davenport, I'd now like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Valerie Forbes, Dean of the College of Biological Sciences, to describe the process from her perspective.
Great. Thank you, Provost Croson, and Dean Forbes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Provost Croson, and thank you, Chair Davenport, for giving us opportunity to tell you a little bit about how the College of Biological Sciences is aligning our own strategic planning with the system-wide strategic plan of the university. Developing these goals in a college-specific way has been somewhat of an iterative process that started with last year's compact planning and continued as we started to implement our FY 2022 budget. As a result, we've become much more systematic at mapping our investments clearly onto the impact initiatives and goals. I have to say, as I've started to work more closely with the CBS version of Impact 2025, I found it extremely helpful, whereas I don't think it's going to fundamentally change what we do as a college. It provides a really useful framework and language to articulate what we do as a college and how that feeds into the overall mission of the university. In mid-January, I held a strategic planning day for the CBS leadership team. In addition to our formal leadership council, we also invited representatives from our undergraduate students, graduate students, and postdocs to make sure that we had a wide diversity of perspectives. And my goals were to continue to familiarize the college leadership with the overall framework and structure of the plan, as well as the terminology and the specific measures. I wanted to make sure I assigned collegiate leads to each of the initiatives and measures, and to begin to get the group to help me start to prioritize our efforts for the coming year in preparation for our upcoming compact process. I've also asked our department heads to share the CBS version of Impact 2025 with their faculty and staff, and have started to make the rounds of departmental faculty meetings to discuss the plan and how CBS is feeding into it with faculty and staff and get their inputs. And those have been very fruitful conversations, and we'll be meeting with our CBS consultative committee as well pretty soon to get their input. So my hope is that doing it this way ensures that the conversation extends well beyond just the small leadership of the college, and creates a shared language and a vision for everybody in CBS. This year, I'm also asking the department heads, our directors and associate deans to report on their contributions to Impact 2025 as part of their annual evaluation process, and we'll be reporting some of the selected metrics in our annual report, which comes out each spring. So you can go to the next slide. So to give you a couple of concrete examples, in the commitment on student success, like other undergraduate admitting colleges, CBS measures success in terms of graduation and retention rates. And in these, we consistently track above the university average. And I realize those legends are a little small, but on the left, the I was going to say red, but it's obviously got to be maroon, is the CBS first year retention rate, and that would be gold, is the university average. And on the right, the maroon is the CBS 4-year graduation rate, the blue is the 6-year graduation rate, and the gold and orange are the university averages for the 4 and 6 year. So for the latest numbers we have, we put our 4-year retention rate at 94.8%, our 4-year graduation rate at 81.2%, and our 6-year graduation rate at 91.1%. And the way the college supports these success measures is in a variety of ways, with our overall goals to help students graduate with as little debt as possible and as much experience, in particular research experience, as possible, because we know that can have a profound effect on their future careers. So with that in mind, this summer we launched the CBS Dean's Research Program, which funds students to work doing research in faculty labs. And this is supports one of my goals to ensure that every single one of our undergraduates has the opportunity to do authentic research during their time in CBS. In addition, we've made student financial support one of our top priorities. When I started as dean 6.5 years ago, we offered very few 1-year scholarships from the college and 0 4-year scholarships. So in the last 6 years, we've increased the number of 4-year scholarships from 0 to 125. It's a priority of our campaign. Going forward, our goals are going to be to increase the size of these scholarships and also to develop scholarships that are targeted particularly at transfer students. We're also taking steps to strengthen our peer mentor program and our inclusive teaching practices. And as we're continuing, hopefully, to grow our undergraduate enrollments, these efforts will be increasingly important to keep our metrics where they are. Next slide, please. So on the research side, we see a lot of potential to both contribute to the system's goal of growing industry partnerships and awards, as well as increasing large multidisciplinary and multi-institution grants. So similar to the student success, this requires multi-pronged efforts. The university has a long history of strength in biotechnology, and I think there are huge opportunities for us to be a key player in the rapidly growing bioeconomy. So in an effort to continue to strengthen our connections with industry, we established in CBS an industry advisory board with representatives from Cargill, Biotechne, Takeda Pharmaceuticals, Lifecore Biomedical, and other Minnesota-based biotech companies. The CBS houses the Biotechnology Institute, which is a university-wide institute. BTI has been a biotech powerhouse for about the last 40 years. We've recently appointed a new director, Professor Claudia Schmidt-Dannert, and under her leadership, I think BTI is really poised to be a major driver of bioeconomy developments at the University of Minnesota. We have also appointed a new director of the MnDRIVE Environment Initiative, with Associate Professor Forrest Isbell taking the reins earlier this year. And strengthening and growing the MnDRIVE Environment Program will support the university's strategic goals around sustainability, as well as advancing industry in the state and beyond. Going down the list of bullets, we are also developing a new undergraduate major in biotechnology that we hope to launch this fall. And the major is designed specifically to provide more specialized training to students who are interested in careers in the biotech industry. In addition to the new major, we've been actively developing training for the biotechnology workforce, and we established a partnership a few years ago with Takeda Pharmaceuticals, where we've been developing relevant courses for their employees, and we've been rolling out these courses that we hope to expand beyond just the Takeda branch in Minnesota to other parts of the company and to other companies in the biotech sector. Finally, we are in the process of establishing a CBS industry partnership working group that will include folks in the college whose roles involve connecting with industry in some way. And the aims here are to improve coordination, create synergies, and share best practices as we grow these partnerships. And I see this group as being the perfect interface with the Corporate Engagement Center that OVPR and UMF recently launched, which is, I think, is a very exciting initiative. So there are further details about these and a couple of other initiatives in your docket, should you be interested. On the right-hand side, increasing large multidisciplinary and multi-institution grants. I think again here, we have a lot of opportunity to build on our obvious strengths. So University of Minnesota ranks second globally in ecology and the environment. And I think provides real opportunities for us to raise our visibility in this area, particularly in the field of global change biology. We have a number of really strong research groups at the university who are working in this field. Your docket contains an overview of ongoing global change biology projects at the university that have received a total of over $30 million recently in external grant support. And I think recognizing the synergy among these groups and seeing them as more than a sum of their parts, we have an incredible opportunity to continue to build our reputation as an international leader here. In addition, the field stations at which a lot of this research takes place provide critical venues for our researchers to engage with the citizens of the state. So Cedar Creek, for example, brings in thousands of K through 12 students on site each year. Sometimes this is their first experience with nature. And they learn about Minnesota's ecosystems. Likewise, Itasca Biological Station and Laboratories that's located in Itasca State Park has done a lot to grow their research as well as their collaborations with the park and with the surrounding community. And thinking that the park brings in about 500,000 visitors every year, that's a pretty big audience for us to engage with. So those are just a few ways that we're advancing the college's mission in alignment with MPAC 2025. So thank you, Chair Davenport. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dean Forbes. Excellent presentation. And we'll move to Dean Mays, please.
Thank you, Provost Crossan, and thank you, Chair Davenport, for this opportunity to share with the Board of Regents a few ways the School of Dentistry is aligning with the university's strategic plan and measuring its progress. For the School of Dentistry, this alignment process began last year as a component of the budget compact for FY22. Initial iteration completed last year consisted of mapping our daily work and the school's strategic goals with MPAC 2025 goals and metrics. Approximately 4 months later, as has been stated earlier, the provost met with us and some senior leaders to provide some feedback, and some of those feedback will lead into our refinement of our strategic plan in the future. The school is currently in the process of refining the strategic plan, and in a few weeks, representatives from staff, faculty, and administration will participate in a facilitated session led by leadership and talent development staff to accomplish that refinement. During that session, one of the alignment focuses will be MPAC 25 goals and metrics. The school also has an institutional effectiveness committee that annually reviews school activities to ensure that the goals of the strategic plan are being met. Therefore, future outcome measures will be monitored by the IEC. Metrics established in the new strategic plan and IEC review will guide the allocation of resources and investments for the School of Dentistry. The School of Dentistry is committed to student success and finds some natural alignments in MPAC 25. I would like to highlight two specific commitments, 1.13 and 1.2.3. The school is committed to increasing the amount of scholarship dollars available to students. Although it is true that many dentists will have an income sufficient enough to pay off student loans, we have come to realize that scholarships are a way for us to recruit the best and the brightest students. As peer institutions provide financial scholarship dollars that compete with our recruitment efforts, increasing our capacity to provide scholarships help to attract learners that we desire in our program, including Minnesota residents. This past November for Give to the Max Day, we focused our giving request on soliciting funds for scholarship support. Our alumni and donors heeded the call and gave generously, and we will continue to put our efforts towards this initiative. We are also very close to finalizing a grant from a foundation seeking to provide resources for scholarships. We're also working on a second initiative to raise additional resources for scholarships in FY23. I want to switch now to student well-being. We have seen firsthand the impact of student well-being on academic performance and are committed to developing programs within the school to improve our students' well-being. To that end, we recently sought funding through a HRSA grant to develop well-being programs in the school. Unfortunately, that grant was not funded, but we will keep trying. We have learned that daily circumstances for some students require an immediate need for counseling. But as this has grown for many schools, appointments can sometimes be delayed. Therefore, we are in the process of developing a hiring plan for an in-house counselor to provide bridge support with Boynton Student Counseling Services. Switching now to the area of research and discovery, we have a goal that aligns with 2.12. The School of Dentistry has a goal of being ranked in the NIDCR top 10 and Blue Ridge top 14 for research funding. We are currently 14th and 19th respectively, but are in the process of developing greater capacity for additional research activity and funding. We understand that this goal will require a combination of hiring new researchers to expand our funding capacity, and with new researchers, often requires laboratory renovations to establish an environment conducive for their work. Lastly, today, the School of Dentistry finds alignment with commitment 3.13, serving as a destination practice. As a program that provides clinical care, both within Twin Cities at our Moose Howard clinics and extramurally at outreach sites, the school seeks to serve as a destination practice. The school has clinics where students, residents, and faculty provide care. This allows us to provide urgent, preventive, and elective care to patients from diverse communities, as well as those with insurance and those without insurance. In each of these spaces, we plan to develop and/or enhance measures to improve patient experiences and ensure that we have a patient-centric workflow. Our student clinics allow us to serve as a safety net clinic for those in need, while our faculty practice and resident clinics allow us to provide care at different levels. Each of these clinical operations will develop plans to enhance the care we provide. These enhancements will focus on patient experiences, such as automated billing and scheduling processes, and updating the use of technology. Chair Davenport, thank you. And I will turn the presentation back to Provost Strauss.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, members of the committee. I hope that this glimpse into the inner workings of how we're aligning collegiate and school actions with the system-wide strategic plan has been helpful for you. As I mentioned previously, and as you will see in the accountability report that you will vote on tomorrow, our typical reporting will come from me or the appropriate vice provost, and will focus on campus-wide progress toward our measures. But we did want you to understand the underlying processes that will generate those reports. So as we turn to our discussion today, I want to again thank Dean Forbes and Dean Mays for joining me. We're all happy to answer your questions and hear your thoughts. I'm especially interested in your perspective on the opportunities you see and perhaps the tactics you employ in your own organizations that could help us further align unit level activities with our system-wide strategic plan. So Chair Davenport, that concludes our remarks.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. And while we get our questions together, I just want to emphasize a couple things. One, this is a big organization and this is a big strategic plan. And to do this well and to deliver it, the goals in a meaningful way, that's hard. And so what you saw in your packet is the framework that is drilling this down into the front line of the university, the Twin Cities campus. And for the plan to really be successful, it's critical that, as you heard, there's alignment, there's accountability, it's tied to budget, and it's tied to performance review and accountability. So I think that's really tremendous lifting, and plans are successful when they're executed well. So I think we're on a good path to that. So we'll start questions with Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, and thanks for what I'll phrase as a look under the hood as you look at the college level and see how these goals and these strategic objectives come to life. And the one I'm most interested in, because I'm not as familiar with how advisory boards work here. I'm very familiar with those up at UMD, and I served on a lot of them before becoming a regent, but they're kind of a staple of the academic world, but they're vitally important. And Dean Forbes, I think I'm most interested in getting any sense you have or anybody else, or how do we keep those vibrant and how do we keep them morphing and changing, not so much to do everything we want in our strategic plan, but to engage that external world. And I'm super impressed. I don't remember which slide number it was, but some of the specifics you listed where we're getting, concrete new developments, new activities, new initiatives, and we're engaging industry and the external world. So I don't know if anybody has some thoughts about that, but to me, it's just vitally important that we keep growing the role of advisory boards and letting it change and evolve.
Good question, Regent McMillan, advisory boards. Dean Forbes.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, and thank you for the question. Yeah, I think historically, our college has not been that active in industry engagement. We've had pockets of engagement, and I think what I've seen is our industry advisory board has been extremely helpful in some of the larger college-wide initiatives. So for example, in developing this new biotechnology undergraduate major, we've sought their advice on what kind of skills they, as future employers, are looking for in students. What kind of jobs would students coming out with this kind of degree be qualified for? I think they're relatively new. So we've had, maybe 3 or 4 meetings of the group. And I think you were really spot on. The challenge for us, I think, is to make sure that we continue to find meaningful ways to engage them. And we don't meet them and talk at them for an hour, but we actually do seek their advice, and then that we're prepared to take it when they give it to us.
Love to hear that. Thank you.
Regent Verhalen.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. I think this is probably best started with Provost Croson, and then you can pass it around however is most appropriate, but it tails very closely to the question Regent McMillan just asked. And when looking at the industry partnership working group idea, there's a lot of different ways that can be implemented, right, across different colleges, across the different campuses, with the foundation, et cetera. And one of the concerns that boards that I've sat on and organizations that I've been a part of have faced is really depleting the well, so to speak, or going from too many different directions to the same resource and asking for different things. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but how are those different participants and different facets of an organization hearing the messages? And also, what are we learning from those? So really keeping in mind all of that, is there some sort of central coordinating that is going on between the colleges who might be asking for this industry input, but also with the foundation, also with our other system campuses? And I can think of several examples, but I'd like to start there.
Provost Croson.
Yes, Regent Verhalen, Chair Davenport, thank you very much for the question. And it so perfectly sets up our next presentation, which is going to be exactly about that kind of coordinating activity. So indeed, in such a large and decentralized place, it's very easy for each college to go to a particular company and ask for a representative for their board. And sometimes that might be appropriate. There may be, people on the business side and people on the ag side and people on the clinical side at a given company who do want to participate, and sometimes it might not be. And so our next presentation is going to talk a little about the structure that we set up in order to help direct those requests, both from the corporations themselves and from the colleges.
Thank you. And
yeah, go ahead, please.
If I may, Chair Davenport, one
Verhalen.
follow-up. One thing that I think will be very important as we continue this conversation into our next steps and going forward is how those coordination efforts really focus on coordinating between opportunities versus feeling like a stifling or closing off point. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Very good. And I see Michael Oakes in the audience. He's listening to your question. I believe he will be ready. Very good. All right, we have a question from Chair Powell. And we need you to unmute yourself, please.
Gosh, you'd think I'd learn after 3 years. But so anyway, I just want to thank you for the presentation. And Provost Croson, to your question, what would we, thoughts on the process? I have to say, I think you've got a good process, and which starts with the department or the college strategic plan, and then which is going to be unique. And, we'll have some things in common with the broader plan, but we'll also have, their own priorities, and then links that to the metrics. So I think it's a good process, and I do compliment you on it. And it seems like it's, really coming to life well. I have two questions, one for Dean Forbes, and it really then, this also, I think, tacks on a bit to Regent McMillan's comment. You mentioned and highlighted the Takeda partnership a couple times. And I'm wondering if you can, tell us just a bit more about how that partnership came about, some of the key things we've learned. It sounds like it's been very successful, and what can we clone from that partnership as we consider, we'd like to have a broader group of companies at that level of engagement. And then for Dean Mays, I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm guessing that we train most of the dentists in Minnesota. And I'm just wondering, from a kind of strategic and metric standpoint, what kind of outreach opportunities, unique outreach opportunities does that give us, given that we're really the center of the dental community across the entire state? And I'm wondering if you can maybe just a few comments on that. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. We'll start in order of your questions. So Dean Forbes and then Dean Mays. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. The Takeda partnership started with a grant from DEED, and they have a new site in, I believe it's Brooklyn Park, and we're just developing the site and realized they had some needs for educating their employees in various aspects of good manufacturing practice. So we developed a series of courses in collaboration with them that we could roll out to their employees. Interestingly, we started to develop these courses, and then, it was March of 2020. So we had to retool the courses, which were mostly supposed to be in person, to be online courses, which actually turns out to be an opportunity in many ways, because they have many other sites across the country. And this will allow us to easily roll out some of those courses to a much wider audience of their employees. And the plan all along was to use this model to kind of fine tune or adapt courses to other companies. And that's kind of where we are right now, but that is the plan. And it has been very successful. The Takeda won an award recently from the state, and I'm going to not remember the exact details, but they attribute this partnership to be one reason why they were successful in winning that award. So that's kind of good fun.
Very good. Thank you. And that meets a lot of the state's goals of that funding program, job skills, I'm guessing. Yeah. Dean Mays.
Chair Davenport, Chair Powell. Yes, we graduate approximately 72% of the dentists who are in the state of Minnesota. And so that becomes an extremely great resource for us. One of the things that it has helped us to do is to develop pipeline programs that help guide students into our programs and get students interested in oral health professions. Another highlight of that relationship with having over 70% of the practicing dentists from our school is a program that's called MinCrop, which is a rural program that Dr. Lopez in our school leads, and it takes students throughout the 4 years and places them into rural settings, gives them that experience with the goal of taking them back into those spaces. The other thing that the 72% gives us is alumni engagement. Our alumni engagement is fabulous. I meet with our alumni society quarterly and get updates and advice. But just to highlight the scholarship that I mentioned that we're working on, one of the main reasons that we're in the process of being really, really close to sealing a deal is because of efforts of an alumnus. And so that 72% of practicing dentists in the state is very helpful and very strong and provides a lot for the school.
Thank you.
Very good. And I know that those dentists are active, and with technology changing, it's important to keep in touch with them. So thank you for that. Last question, Regent Kenyanya.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just had a comment. I found what has become my favorite metric in here, which is graduation rate, because the only thing worse than 20K in debt is 20K in debt and no degree. And Dean Forbes, on this chart here, there's actually a point in about 2010 going onwards where the CBS 4-year graduation rate was higher than the university 6-year graduation rate, which is pretty astounding. So just want to compliment that and then just reiterate how important, of course, in your colleges, but in all our colleges and campuses, it is to invest in graduation rate, because I think it's one of the effective ways to lower student debt. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. And we'll go back to Regent McMillan. Another question, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Davenport, for indulging me. Dean Mays, one of your last comments there just struck a huge chord. The 8th Congressional District is as big as maybe anybody but the 7th. And there's a lot of cities and a lot of places in it, and they're all rural except Duluth. I must have 15 letters that I've collected over a decade from mayors who want more dentists in their rural Minnesota town from this state's, land-grant university with its dental school. So I am thrilled to hear that you're engaged in that kind of work and that we're finding ways, despite lack of funding for rural dentists. I know there's a clinic in Hibbing, but I don't know if you've got any more you want to say about that, but I just don't know how we deliver more bang for our buck than when we can place healthcare professionals, especially dentists, in rural settings. So if there's anything else you want to add there, I'd love to hear about it, or maybe I can catch you offline, but that is just top flight, super important work.
Indeed. Dean Mays.
Chair Davenport, Regent McMillan. The other thing that I'll add is, again, it goes back to alumnus and the alumni that I was talking about with scholarship support is just, again, phenomenal. I'm probably just holding off him a little bit because one of the things that he wants to work on is a rural track. And I actually just talked with Dr. Lopez, who I mentioned earlier, just about 10 days ago about a rural track. And so we will start to look at that. She is going into a phased retirement, and we were just discussing some of the things that possibly she might focus on, and that might be one of them. So it's highly on our radar, and we're doing everything that we can.
Thank you.
Very good. Regent Hips.
Yes, thanks, Chair Davenport. To Regent McMillan's comments, I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I think we're doing a much better job. I've seen a lot more young dentists coming back into our area of the state, which is a direct indication that the program is working, and I appreciate that. So can always use a few more though. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that great presentation, and thank you for all the hard work, and that extends to your colleagues, and we're fortunate to have 2 good examples in front of us, and I know that there are many more examples of integration and alignment for Impact 25. Thank you. We will move to our second agenda item, which is place-based innovation ecosystems. And we welcome back Interim Vice President for Research, Michael Oakes. But first, I would like to invite President Gable to introduce this item. President Gable.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Johnson, and members of the committee. So today we're really excited to highlight how our focus on corporate engagement is intersecting with our ability to facilitate the creation of place-based innovation ecosystems. You've heard a lot about our new corporate engagement center. You're going to hear more today. And you've heard about the innovation corridor as a concept, but we're diving in deeper looking at intersections, looking how all of this fits together across our system, across different units within the system, with our partners, both on campus, our partners in the corporate community, and how this affects our mission of research, teaching, and service. So today's presentation builds upon the finance and real estate aspects of the innovation corridor, which have been discussed in finance and operations. And it also builds on the broad focus of the Corporate Engagement Center. This is, as you know, a very big focus of this administration and a very key component of the strategic plan. So Interim Vice President for Research, Michael Oakes, is here to provide this overview from our top 10 $1 billion a year research distinction, our record number of startups and patents, the unique attributes of our headquartered economy, and our vibrant corporate ecosystem that we literally sit in the center of, both physically and in terms of innovation and creativity. He's going to highlight the advantages of an improved corporate partnership structure around research and innovation, and then how the establishment of innovation districts are really the best way for us to lean into opportunities for scientific discovery, resource sharing, technology commercialization, research impact, faculty development, student success, community support, economic growth, and many other areas. But really importantly, he will demonstrate how the Innovation Corridor and Corporate Engagement Center are linked to Impact 2025, the Twin Cities Campus Master Plan, and East Gateway, which you will also hear about over the course of this board meeting, and we'll discuss that in some detail tomorrow. So with that, Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Vice President Oakes.
Thank you, President Gable. The floor is yours, Dr. Oakes.
Chair Davenport, Regents, thank you. Good morning. Thank you, President Gable. As President Gable described this morning, I want to share and build off from my December presentation of the state of the research enterprise. And what I want to do this morning is to focus on the rationale, the reasoning of why we're doing corporate engagement, why we're doing place-based ecosystem development and partnership, which is a fancy phrase for innovation corridor and related groups. And what I want to do is to first talk about some of the deeper rationale connecting with my December presentation, focus for a few minutes on the Corporate Engagement Center and what that means and how it's connected, and then move into the innovation district ideas and how it's all connected and linked, as President Gable described. You saw this same slide, you might recall, back in December. And one of the key messages I want to again emphasize is that the University of Minnesota is a leading research university. That's a very special kind of institution in society. And what we're trying to do here is to leverage that and participate in the broader ecosystem for the state, for the development, economic development, obviously education development, and so forth. The goal of the research university is to help foster prosperity, health, and security. And we do that through research, through talent development, and service. Research universities, I want to argue, and I think it's true, are the engine of innovation, impact, and workforce development. And I want to offer you, make sure that we're all clear that this university, especially as President Gable just described, is particularly poised to have tremendous growth and impact in this area. I also shared this slide with you this past December. This is how, obviously coming from Impact 25, the very important strategic plan. And I want to try to make the strong link between corporate engagement, innovation districts, and the strategic plan, Impact 25. I can tell you in my office, the Office of Vice President for Research, we routinely, almost daily, talk about and leverage the Impact 25, and particularly these 2 points, which are discovery, impact, and innovation, and my favorite word, mintersections. So this is just part of what we do. It's baked in. As we talk about corporate engagement, place-based ecosystems, and so forth, I wanted to again bring this same slide to you, which is, awards by major funding agencies, primarily from the federal government. One point I want to make is the B&I, that's business and industry, and we're growing that. Again, you might recall this past year, we had a massive award for COVID-related research. That's why it's a big gap, big leap. But in addition, I want to emphasize that the NIH, NSF, DOD, and so forth, these are strategic investments from the federal government into research and development into research universities and ultimately into society. I'd like to be clear that changing this is not part of the plan. We want to continue to have massive and very important growth and sustainability in the federal investment. What we're talking about this morning is to add on to that, to do new things. It's not about replacement, it's about doing more. Hopefully, and part of my job is to seek the matchmaking opportunities for these win-win relationships with our corporate partners, governments, and so forth to grow the state. Part of the other aspect of this slide, the awards and the amazing, tremendous impact of the university faculty and research community more generally, is the element of academic freedom. I just want to mention that so that we're at least clear that as we move for corporate engagement, I think there's nothing inconsistent with academic freedom. What we're talking about here this morning is to provide opportunities for researchers interested in this kind of work. I like to say that, I don't do any of the research, and none of the researchers really need to listen to me about what topics they're focused on. So here we're offering opportunities and context for growth. Here's a new graph. This shows on the top bar, the top line if you want, research and development expenditures. This is coming out of federal data for corporations, businesses. The lower two lines are what the research universities, the academy more generally gets. You can see they're outspending us a little bit. I, of course, want to help us participate in that massive growth for problem solutions. Like, we're trying to figure out how we can work with our corporate partners, use our amazing faculty and resources in order to help grow the corporate R&D, and in so doing, the university R&D. This is the partnership we seek, and there's just tremendous opportunity. And as President Gabel said, particularly tremendous opportunity here in the Twin Cities and Minnesota region. One question, I think it's an important question to ask, is why would a major corporation, and we all can imagine some, why would they want to participate with our researchers when I just showed their massive investment in R&D research? What do they get? And here's a quote from a pretty important academic paper on this, looking at industry academia collaborations. And the important point is that a well-funded corporation still has tremendous opportunities when partnering with a research institution such as ours. It's true that they often have more money, they can move faster, and they aren't, inhibited by our tenure process. But I want to say that that is what makes us special. It's the fact that we have independent researchers being creative, using their academic freedom for discovery and impact. And that makes us an outstanding partner, often for fundamental research, but in addition to applied research. And so when it's working as a system, corporations get things and we get things, and hopefully society benefits. So corporations seek us for cutting edge talent, for research that they can't do, for talent they don't have in the research space that we can teach them and work with them. And of course, we're also interested in, on occasion, philanthropy from the same corporate partners. This is where we're going with the Corporate Engagement Center that I'll talk about in a few more minutes. Here's one of my favorite graphics. I made this myself. What I'm trying to convey here, right? What I'm trying to convey here is that there are hopefully a virtuous cycle between university research and more corporate or industrial research. And the idea is there are fundamental problems of science and culture and so forth. The academic research plays a key role. Our researchers at this university make discoveries. They might produce an academic paper, advance human knowledge. Very important. Then the applied researchers can convert that into doing things in society. And then with respect to often technology and industrial stuff, there's sometimes a shift to the industrial R&D researchers that we saw on the graph a few moments ago. And then they can do scale up work and sort of commercialization work. The important point is that often then again yields fundamental problems to go back to the university researcher system. So this virtuous cycle of a system, when it's working well, is what we're trying to achieve. So it's win-win-win, and everyone's, hopefully benefiting. So that's why this graph that I made is so darn important. Thanks for chuckling. When we talk about a place-based ecosystem, we're talking about a collaboration. I want to emphasize that it is not wise for the university to dominate such collaborations. We want to be a key partner, but it is collaboration nonetheless with local governments, obviously state, perhaps federal government, clearly industry, startups, school systems, community groups, and so forth. It is this kind of partnership writ large that is what really makes this effort so exciting. When we do this, we have to think about networks, our mission here at the university, not forgetting that. We have to cultivate a risk-taking culture, something that universities traditionally haven't been good at, but I'm telling you, there's some amazing risk takers and innovative folks around. When the provost and the deans hire their faculty, they can think about, just as Dean Forbes described, hiring innovative entrepreneurial faculty. So it's not a static system, we're all moving together. And of course, talent development is key, not only for the students, but within the talent. The research teams, not just the principal investigators themselves, but the entire apparatus that supports them. This is where we're going collectively. This is what creates ecosystems for innovation. Yeah, it's never easy. If it was easy, we could all do. So there's obstacles. One of the difficult obstacles between corporate research and, if you want, university research is divergent missions. I don't think they're that divergent. The conversations I've had with senior VPs and R&D, it turns out we're very similar. But there is cultural and mission differences that we think we need to lay on the table. Faculty interest or disinterest is also important. We simply have to face the facts that sometimes we have an amazing opportunity and our researchers don't want to jump in. That's okay. My job is to help show them that this is interesting, creative, beneficial work. That not only helps perhaps the industry, but it also helps their academic questions. It advances their disciplines in novel and important ways. Intellectual property, fortunately, we've done a great job here at this university with MinIP and other structures we can talk about. The pace, yep, sometimes we need to go fast, sometimes we need to slow it down. This is science. There can be an academic bureaucracy. My job, of course, is to make that as minimal as possible. Part of this as well, I think, is just having more and more social interaction with our corporate R&D partners. The more we know each other, the more we can do together. And of course, leadership, President Gables and yours, and perhaps mine, trust and investment, this is where the obstacles must be addressed. So with this, I'll turn briefly to the new and very exciting Corporate Engagement Center. This is a new idea that President Gable has asked me to make sure works, and I want to talk about it for a few minutes, and of course, we can talk about it at length during Q&A. I shared this same slide back in December, and it's an equation. The Office of Vice President of Research plus the University of Minnesota Foundation creates this Corporate Engagement Center. It is this unprecedented collaboration and really close working together that makes this so exciting. The foundation is just outstanding at relationship management. They know people, they know how to not drop the balls. And then the researchers, of course, are really good at their research. So bringing this together is the whole idea. Now, I created in my office a group of folks who are all interrelated, just sort of realigning folks. And this is the Spark group that I'll come back to talk about again. This is the Tech Com group, the Tech Commercialization group, and then the Corporate Engagement Center. And we all meet and talk about these things weekly. And so when we have corporate discussions, which we're having more and more of, our team is all on the same page. And then we work with the deans, such as Valerie Forbes and others. And I think that's the secret to success. This figure describes the corporate engagement model coming out of the foundation. And what's new here is a place-based collaborative, the fifth element, if you will. And so this is what's beginning to transition us not only from pure corporate engagement and all the goodness that can happen there, but focusing on specific geographic areas, like East Gateway, like the Innovation Quarter. I'll talk about that in a minute. So this is the conceptual link between all that's happening between these initiatives. I mentioned it last time in December that the secret sauce to all this, from my perspective, is this Spark group. This is a group that is working to cultivate faculty and opportunities. The fact is, if we build it, they may not come. So part of what we're doing is to ensure that the faculty are interested, that we know what the faculty want, and so forth, and so that we're making good matches. Anyway, I just wanted to reemphasize that because it's special, such a special point. We've already had success. Cisco System continues to thrive. They came to us and they said, let's work together. And together we've quickly, very quickly, in a matter of months, picked up many projects, 14 and growing. We have an IP agreement and so forth. This is also true with partnerships across university, School of Management, liberal arts, so forth, obviously biotech and the medical school. So it's these kinds of relationships that my team has, not only with the corporations, not only with the foundation, but with the deans and their department heads and ultimately the faculty. So it's an integrated approach. I'll turn now to this idea of innovation districts or ecosystems, and then we'll wrap up. These are place-based focus areas to do creative things. The ultimate take-home is that this is a co-development effort. Again, not university dominated, maybe 30, 40% university, and then everyone else doing other things. This is part of our strategic mission, part of MPAC 25, part of President Gabel's vision for this university. It benefits the university, the region, the state, and hopefully the nation. A quote from a sort of famous paper on this: innovation districts are defined as geographic areas where leading anchor institutions, that's us, that's Cargill, Medtronic, and so forth, and companies cluster and connect with startups. They're business incubators and accelerators, and they're physically compact, transit accessible, and technically wired and mixed use housing off it. Just sounds like something proximal to the university. Exactly. That's where we're going. Another quote that I like, this one talks about mash-ups. Somehow that word tickles me. Bringing these amazing partners together and mashing them up, sharing, bicycle transit, clean energy, fueled by caffeine. That's the kind of thing we're trying to develop in proximity to the university. It's a proximity geographic play where everyone's winning. So Boston Scientific might be learning something from a Cargill employee in the office in these innovation spaces. And that's sort of the goal. So here, it's almost super productivity, that there's synergy from these works. And I always worry about that term, but there it is. We're clearly not the first to think about this. We all know about Silicon Valley, Research Triangle in North Carolina, and so many others. One thing I'd like to share, if it's not clear, is that Silicon Valley didn't just happen. Silicon Valley was a strategic plan coming out of Stanford University post-World War II. The provost, who at that time was doing two jobs, vice president of research and provost, worked with industry, worked with the government to develop what became Silicon Valley. This is sort of the holy grail that everyone wants to do. We want to do something similar like our other university competitors here as described in the slide. We want to move the ball forward for the benefit of the university, the locality, and of course the state and beyond. Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon, University Pitt, and Pittsburgh Community College, these are all working together and they have this webpage and it's pretty interesting. One of the things I am interested about Pittsburgh is it is akin to the University of Minnesota in its urban size and other characteristics. So we're in the Big Ten, but Ohio State University is a little bit different situated than the University of Minnesota. So we're looking to Pittsburgh, my team is looking to all these other places, and I want to emphasize looking for reasons why they failed as well. It's not only success, but what didn't work and why, so we can learn from their mistakes. That's the benefit of the team we've got going on here. Almost done. Here again is a model of collaboration industry, university, infrastructure, venture capital, government have to work together. One of my jobs is to work to matchmake, to have good relationships with all this so that our university, our researchers, and therefore our corporate partners and other elements can succeed. That's the goal. With a little head nod to Coach Fleck, we're all rowing the boat together. Here, this is the key players involved in this conversation right now. There's the University of Minnesota Foundation Real Estate Group, Investment Group. We have the Corporate Engagement Center, Tech Commercialization, the Spark team I've mentioned, Government Relations, and of course, the deans and the college units must never be forgotten. So all of these groups are, interestingly, working very well together to move the big boat in the same direction. And I just think that's a super exciting time and really just fulfilling the vision that we all have and President Gable's articulated. A few definitions before we go. This stuff gets tricky even for my team when we talk about what exactly do we mean. So I'm trying to lay out a little flag here so we're all on the same page. A place-based ecosystem is the highest level term. It's general, it's a little nerdy, a little academic-y, but it's a place where assets along with economic and networking assets are together. And the idea is to cultivate idea generation and joint problem solving. So this is like a high level general term. Within that are innovation districts. These are places that universities and other groups might have. It's a geographically bounded place where this entrepreneurial innovation activity happens. So it's smaller and more defined. Within that is our term of innovation corridor. Innovation corridor is one kind of innovation district. It's our term, and it is still general. It includes East Gateway, a particular property, but you can see the hierarchy here. So as we talk about this stuff, my head can sometimes spin, and I wanted to try to help clarify these words. Innovation districts we're interested in are across the state of Minnesota. There's obviously work going on in the Twin Cities. There's amazing things in Rochester, some partnership with Mayo. You know about some stuff going on in Austin. You're going to hear Dean Burr in a little bit talk about the amazing work going on there, and some great stuff in MedTech and others up in Duluth. So these are where we're focusing. Now I want to emphasize the university has outreach and interesting research across the entire state. You heard Dean Forbes mention some of the things she has going on in the state. Dean Burr will tell you more about some amazing place-based research groups that are so important because they depend on the certain soil in part of the university. But these innovation districts are this mashup, and that's why they're focused on this particular map. What are the goals? We want to grow. We're going to help drive the knowledge economy, high-paying jobs across the state. We want to leverage public and private assets. We're going to collide. We love this word, collide all these assets, put them in a room, give them some chewing gum and get some stuff done. Obviously promote student and youth success, particularly DEI issues, and center this notion of equity for our community partners. This is just so important. So my team, we often share stories and news articles and examples of how venture capital can leverage DEI initiatives and equity and so forth. How will it work? Well, this is the great University of Minnesota, College of Biological Sciences, Science and Engineering, and so forth. We have amazing opportunities to grow. President Gable mentioned the density of the Fortune 500 companies. We have a maturing startup culture, this Midwest location. I think we're the right size, the Goldilocks size, not too big, not too small, tremendous opportunity, and of course, state support and interest. I note that the governor recently had some quite consistent remarks in this space. So the innovation corridor, what is it exactly? I don't want to tell you these properties, but it's generally along the green line, right? This is not surprisingly from really here to the state capitol. And the idea here is that corporations, startups, and so forth will want to join and be in close proximity, and my job is to help them get there. Randy Schistel from Boston Scientific offered this quote to us. He's so excited about the innovation corridor. He thinks that Boston Scientific, might have an interest in this stuff. And I just want to say that we're having these conversations. And when I talk to these corporate leaders, they often say, this is just wonderful, let's keep going. You're going to hear from the foundation on the eastern edge of campus here, the East Gateway project. I'm going to leave that for them. That's tomorrow morning. And here is a senior executive from Honeywell also talking about why they want to partner with us. So we are not doing this in a vacuum. We're doing this already with partnership. Finishing up, next steps, we're collaborating, working with the foundation, securing anchor institutions, and garnering faculty feedback. That really matters. I can't emphasize that enough. Here's the last slide. Place-based ecosystems align with our mission. It's part of the Impact 25, the campus plan and the strategy. We're a problem-solving university. And I think that the idea of team just can't be overestimated. So that's it. I thank you very much for your time. If you would indulge me, I'd like to invite my teammates up and we'll answer any questions that you have.
Very good. Thank you, Interim VP Oakes. And while we get our questions lined up, a different mashup kind of question for you. And it may be implied through the presentation, but I'd like to know when we look at invitations for new or expansion of business and industry in the state and contributing to the state's economy, do you see the Corporate Engagement Center as having a direct role, and maybe it's through President Gable, Provost Croson, whomever, researchers, in that activity at the big level? I know we're engaged with DEED, job skills and all that, but I would like to hope that we are at the table because we have so much to offer.
Chair Davenport, yes, that's entirely the point, that we are at the table, we are coordinating with this big, amazing organization with so many moving parts. But the point of the Corporate Engagement Center is to be active in these conversations, to be at the table, to be part of the planning process, working with corporations and of course the state, DEED and so forth, and to help coordinate so that we're all on the same page and progressing together.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We'll start our questions with Regent Hips.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. It's going to be no surprise to anyone here probably that I love this a lot. So I especially like it because I think there's two main functions. The two main functions for me that the U does is the economic development portion of research and student success. And this aligns both of those perfectly. About 75 years ago, we did a innovation ecosystem in the turkey business in Minnesota. And I was a part of that later on, but the industry and the researchers and everybody said, we're going to raise turkeys in Minnesota. And they provided the research, they provided the innovation, the different, I mean, it's 40 below here. We need different facilities than they need in the South. But over the years, we created this great partnership with the University of Minnesota industry and growers that now we're the #1 producer of turkeys in the United States. And it's huge economic impact for our corn farmers and whatever else that raise corn. And when we get into problems, we've grown together with the U. So when we get into problems, the university helps us solve those problems. And like a few years ago, we had this thing called bird flu that was devastating to our industry. And the university was right there with us and it saved the industry again. So, I mean, that turkeys is 75 years ago, but this gets us to the future of whatever the next thing is going to be. And I don't know what that is, but I want to commend you for this. I think it's really important for university and for the state of Minnesota. And I think the legislature is going to really love this. So thank you.
Thank you. Regent Farnsworth.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. And I wanted to echo excitement for this. I'm sincerely impressed and excited with this. So I want to thank OVPR, UMF, and other partners who are involved with this. I've just been poking around on the website a little bit just to see what I would see as a member of the corporate sector, just kind of going in for the first time and how to engage with this. And I think it's extraordinarily easy to engage with, offers many venues to plug into. I mean, understanding, of course, this isn't the only way that folks are going to be partnering with us, but I think a website, for an initiative of this nature is really can be considered the front porch by many folks for an initiative like this. As a student here at the university, I've been a part of, in CHD, been a part of a case study with Target. I've attended a lot of the First Tuesday luncheons as just a couple my personal connections to seeing how corporate engagement plays out at the university. And we're really excited to see that we're growing this so substantially, or have this vision and want to continue to grow. I looked a little bit, I think the Pittsburgh Innovation District was mentioned in here as an example. Looked a little bit at their website as well, just again to start piecing this together and start interacting in the space. And was particularly impressed under their incentives to invest section around incentives for developers, incentives for investors. See a lot of synergy there, of course, and that's a lot of the point of the East Gateway work, and looking forward to that conversation tomorrow as a regent who wasn't a member of the board when that started, but is now catching up on that. So just see a lot of synergy. I share Regent Hip's excitement, and I'm sure other colleagues are going to offer excitement as well. And just wanted to thank you for this work and your presentation. Thank you, Chair Davenport.
Thank you, Regent Farnsworth. We will go to Regent Van Halen and then McMillan, Powell, and Rocha.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. And just for clarity of the record, I am not related to the Van Halens of Eddie and wonderful 80s music, but I'm used to it, so I'll take it. I've been called much worse.
Apologies.
No, all good. I have two different lines of questioning. One is to follow up on my question earlier that Provost Croson said I should direct towards you, which is really in your presentation and in the discussions we've had, it's been talking that you've had is research, funding, innovation. And my question, especially around the Corporate Engagement Center, is really taking that to a different direction. All of those things critical and absolutely important to all of our system campuses. But what efforts are underway to pull together what is happening in individual departments at individual colleges, for example, the Swenson College of Science and Engineering at UMD, at UMR, et cetera, where maybe a department or an individual college within a system campus is pulling together a group of graduates to say, hey, we have someone from Honeywell, we have someone who's now at Cisco, we have someone who's now at US Steel. We want to pull them all together and find out what industry is doing and where we can be helpful. How does that all get coordinated so that, again, corporations and industry partners aren't being asked for too much, but then also to redisseminate that information so we're not asking for it in 8 different locations?
Dr.
Chair Davenport, Regent Verhalen, thank you for the question. Superb. The idea here is coordination and information sharing. So we view the Corporate Engagement Center as a node for sharing of information with other researchers, obviously, but also with the more academic or teaching side of the house, the deans, the department heads, and so forth. In addition, of course, the university has a really tremendous student services organization that is also part of our conversations. So we're trying to make sure that if as you say, a department wants to bring some students together and maybe Honeywell, wherever else is coming to town, that everyone who should be in that conversation, the diverse persons who should be on that conversation are actually there. And so that's the goal. Now, this is all still beginning, but it's a tremendous, great start, I dare say, and these conversations are happening. I also say when we talk to industry leaders, vice presidents of R&D and so forth, one of their chief questions is, how can we recruit the most amazing talent in the state and the region? So they are always interested, in my experience, in not only the research partnerships, but also in finding those great students. And so our job in the Corporate Engagement Center is to bridge the gap to the provostial side, if you will, to make sure that that set is also at the table in these conversations. So I hope that answers the question.
Chair Davenport.
Regent Verhalen.
Thank you. It does. I am going to be very interested to see how the center is able to continue to create these opportunities for collaboration while not standing in the way necessarily of, let's say, a department wants to pull together a group of graduates so they know what education their graduates need to get these types of roles, et cetera. And so I think as we go forward, it will be helpful to keep us up to date as to how those conversations continue. And then Chair Davenport, if I may ask a question in a completely different subject line.
I'd like you to hold just one
course.
second while we go to President Gable. You wanted to respond?
I just wanted, thank you, Madam Chair, Regent Verhalen. I just wanted to supplement what Interim Vice President Oaks and team are saying, because there is a certain amount of central coordination that happens at a certain level in what you're describing, which often takes place through advisory boards, guest lectures, or just the relationships that faculty have with their former students who now are employees. There is no plan to fundamentally centralize every single piece of advice that we get. There's always that balance between how much we centralize and how much we don't, because a lot of this is organic. So the idea that we would have some sense of the advice we receive so that we avoid redundancy is something that is the intent of the Corporate Engagement Center. But the idea that there would be one repository of information that everyone would share probably is not. And so I just want to manage expectations and see if there was any additional discussion that anyone wanted to have on that topic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Regent Verhalen, any follow-up or next question?
Chair Davenport, President Gable, I appreciate that. That was my understanding, but clarity is important. The other question I had, a lot of this presentation focused on what was happening with the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus and the colleges here on campus. There was the slide that identified the different districts within the state, but perhaps you could speak a little bit more broadly about how our system campuses beyond the University of Minnesota Twin Cities are being engaged in these opportunities, particularly around established research programs like NRRI, et cetera. And I would really appreciate that.
VP Oaks.
Chair Davenport, Regent Verhalen, thank you. Yes, as I tried to convey, there's tremendous work going on in Duluth. There's more work going on down in Austin, as you'll soon hear, with particularly the Duluth campus. NRRI, Rolf Weberg and I talk every 2 weeks, the director of NRRI. We are continuously trying to not only grow his area, but to be honest, also borrow some of his entrepreneurial spirit down here. Rolf and I share a lot of ideas about creating cultures for research collaboration and this sort of corporate engagement win-win relationship. So the Duluth campus, and particularly NRRI, is a key part of this initiative, baked in from the start. And we are preparing to bake in not only Hormel Institute, obviously, but also the new initiatives that Dean Burr will be talking about soon. There's work going on in Rochester. There's some interesting, innovative stuff that not only the Rochester, but Mayo campus is doing in that space. So we're always trying to collaborate. And then the other thing, if I might, we're also doing some new work in the Build Back Better initiative. And if I might, why don't you go ahead, please? I just, yeah.
Good morning, Chair Davenport and Regents. My name is Amy Kircher. I work in Michael's office. I co-chair Spark with Katie. We're partnering with Greater MSP right now is the lead for this Build Back Better initiative. It's funding from EDA, Economic Development Administration, part of the American Recovery Act. We just learned in December we're a finalist, 529 applicants, 60 finalists, 30 will be funded. It is to grow industry clusters and really to do so in a way that builds resilience and foundationally accelerates infrastructure to grow an industry in your region. Our particular region submitted bioinnovation, so it's called the Bold North Bioinnovation Effort. And we're actively working. We got 90 days to submit a proposal with 8 projects for $75 million. So we took a break and came to visit you today. We're going fast and furious. Again, Greater MSP is leading the effort and the University of Minnesota is partnering. We have a project that the university has with curriculum. We have additional projects with some of our agricultural teams. And then UMF is also working on a project. So it's an exciting effort and it really demonstrates how we, as we think about innovation districts, how we might partner together with government, community, and then the university. So I think it's just a great example of what Michael is talking about.
Thank you. That's very timely information, and we don't want to keep you from that task.
That's right.
And we look forward to good news. So
Thank
we'll
you so
move
much.
on to Regent Powell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Davenport. Terrific presentation, Vice President Oaks and team. It's wonderful stuff. I got a couple comments and then a question. I just want to first underscore, the primacy of academic freedom, which you touched on a couple times, Michael. And I mean, I do think that is the basic foundation of discovery and research, and it's sort of, it's the golden goose. And I think that our corporate partners know that. The other point I wanted to make, and Michael, I think you also are well aware of this, but most, I would say basically all leaders of corporate R&D groups know that no matter how good they are and how smart and how tough and how strong their research organization, they know that 95% of the innovation and the discovery in their industry happens outside of their company. And so, that's why what you're doing here is so important, because partnerships become everything. And, your ability to partner and partner well and partner quickly. So I really think you're on the right track, and this is wonderful. Question I have is, you touched on you touched a bit on what success would look like. And I just wonder, I don't know if now or later, but I think if you could give us at some point more definition of what success is going to look like, and what are the metrics that are going to be key here for us to know and see that we are making progress and we're getting to where we want to go. So any comments you want to make on that would be helpful. And also other ways in which we're collaborating with Greater MSP, because I know that they're very interested in innovation corridors as well. So 2 questions.
Very good. VP Oaks.
Yeah, Chair Davenport, Regent Powell, thank you so much. Well, obviously, I couldn't agree more about the relationship. The definition of metrics and when it's working and when it's not, this is forthcoming. This initiative is getting on its feet. It's going extremely well, super excited. And then we'll be coming soon with what we know about what's working. Some of that is already baked in the MPAC 25. We're going to extend it, and we'll come back and give a report, and we can talk about metrics that not only you, but all of us want to see. In terms of Greater MSP, Rick, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I
And
think,
let me just introduce, we have Rick Hipsch here, no relation.
No
I
relation.
suspect.
no relation that we know of.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Chair Davenport, Regents. Yes, our relationship with the ecosystem of Minnesota and certainly in the Twin Cities with Greater MSP is very strong. We participate in many of their initiatives. As Dr. Kircher talked about, the Build Back Better is one prime example. But it's important as they see the industries that are important to the state of Minnesota from their purview, that those match up with the strengths of the University of Minnesota. And so we definitely get their participation in many of our initiatives. We talked earlier about advisory boards. They participate in some of those as well. And it's an important organization for us to partner with.
Good. And was there follow-up? Regent
Just a
Powell?
quick one, Chair. Thank you. And just to acknowledge that there are some other very powerful regional development organizations across the state. One in Duluth that Regent McMillan was centrally involved in, and I would urge you to reach out to those organizations as well.
Okay, very good. Regent Rocha. Regent Rocha.
Thank you,
And-
Chair Davenport. I was struggling to get those little buttons pushed. Appreciate it. Very exciting presentation, and what a change that's occurred in the world. I mean, just that the last numbers there that showed that the B&I investment, going up by multiples over the last year. Very, very interesting. I've got a question and then a short comment. Vice President Oaks, do we know for anybody on your panel? So Stanford obviously is held up as an example of great success in this area. do we know what the financial impact on Stanford's bottom line has been as a result of the collaborations in that area? How that's impacted their ability to, conduct all of their operations, including their research.
VP Oaks.
Chair Davenport, Regent Rocha, thank you. Great question. I think it's fair to say that the development of Silicon Valley, spurred by Stanford, has had tremendous impact on what previously was a smaller university. It's now obviously world-class organization, and that partnership, that culture of entrepreneurialism and innovation and industry, scientific, academic research flow, I think is what drove that university to great heights. And it is now one of the obviously top-ranked universities in expenditures and awards and impact. I don't have the exact number, sir, but massive.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and we'll look for massive here too. And last question to Regent Mayron.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Regent Rocha.
If I may, could I follow up just briefly with a comment?
Please.
Thank you. And so, the growth in this capacity for the university and its relationships, it has been amazing in these last few years. And when I take kind of reflect on a gap of 20 years between times of service on this board, it's immeasurable, the change. One of the not to temper the enthusiasm here, because I think we're on the right track, but just a couple of concerns that I think we as a public institution need to be mindful of is that there are people that do have concern about the independence of public institutions when there is such a strong financial relationship, particularly with private businesses in industries. One of the concerns with the tip of the cap to Regent Simonson, who I think continuously asks the question about how we capitalize, if we lag on the income we're receiving from various discoveries and research conducted here, how do we capture that? And when you see a greater investment than from private companies, and Regent Powell, with his exceptional insight into private industry and research, talked about how 95% comes outside of corporations, and corporations are obviously very well set up to take that discovery and commercialize it and turn it into revenue. This is an area that I'm interested in how we can not only participate in this as a partner, but also continue to develop a capacity to be a beneficiary of that, to meet all of our other objectives. The last comment on that is I was surprised in about 6 years ago when I was 7, when I returned to the board. I had a discussion with a member of the administration. It's not with the university anymore, but I had talked about some concerns that I had heard from people in the legislature, and the response was, well, the legislature, provides a very small percentage of our budget these days, and that was obviously a very different perspective than I was used to with respect to university as a land grant university and a public university. And so just want to just make sure that we as a public board elected by the legislature to reflect the interests of the state still maintain that this is a public institution, and we have to be very mindful of that as we enter these very important and relationships that will allow us to do a lot of things that we've not been able to do in the past and contribute to society. So thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Regent Rocha, for those reminders about independence. And I believe we have controls and policy. Would you like to speak to that?
Chair Davenport and Regent Rocha, just quickly, yes, I couldn't agree more. The independence and the integrity of this institution is paramount. And so this is why I have such an interesting job where I'm also promoting research and ensuring compliance and regulatory affairs. So I could go on, but we have really strong conflict of interest policy, strong intellectual property policy, and a whole other set of research misconduct and research integrity incentives so that the brand, if you will, is not violated. And this is part of the public trust I think Regent Rocha is getting at.
Yes, thank you. Good reminders. Regent Mayron.
Yes, thank you very much. I won't pile on with all my other fellow regents, but just suffice it to say, I think this is so exciting. It's all about what the university can do at its best. So I'm thrilled by your presentation and what it portends for us down the road. proof of the pudding is in the eating, so I'm waiting for dinner. The sooner the better. Question for you. You talked about benefits to the Twin Cities, greater MSP, Duluth, Rochester. What about our other system campuses, Crookston and Morris? Are there opportunities there that they will be able to capitalize on in their area, those economic interests that they are focused on in their particular parts of the region?
VP Oaks.
Chair Davenport, Regent Mayor, and thank you. Wonderful question. Thank you for the kind words. We're a system and we're part of a state. And so one of the elements is all boats rise. So Twin Cities campus has the bolus of externally funded research. And yet Duluth campus, as I've talked about, the work going on in Austin, Minnesota, obviously Morris and Crookston have more teaching programs, but everyone wins. We're doing some very interesting things already with the Morris campus on sustainability, environmental stuff, where they're super strong. So the idea here is that not only are we growing economic development in the Twin Cities, as I described, but it's beginning to spread out. And this is what Dr. Kircher was talking about with Build Back Better and so forth. So the hope is that these things have spillover and that everybody begins to win, including opportunities for the best and bright students who want to come from, say, Morris and join Cargill, whatever they might want to do, so that Cargill knows that our students are getting research opportunities, which are tremendous at Morris, educated through typical curriculum, and then superb citizens to join these organizations. And that's the idea. So that's the mashup I hope we end up with. Thank you.
Great. Well, I think I can speak for all of us to say we look forward to hearing more as we move forward. And thank you very much for the presentation. And colleagues, we will take a quick break. We'll get the next group up here. Next presentation queued up. We'll be back at 11. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, you're good to go. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, welcome back. We have our next agenda item, which we had a little precursor for in the last presentation, and this will be an overview of the future of advanced agriculture research in Minnesota, the FARM initiative. And we have with us Dean Brian Burr, College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences, and President Gable, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Chair Davenport, Vice Chair Johnson, members of the committee, very briefly, but also very excitingly, if that's a word. Is that a word? Today, we bring before you an overview of an exciting new initiative, which we're calling FARM, F-A-A-R-M, which stands for, as you can see on your screen, the Future of Advanced Agricultural Research in Minnesota Initiative. We shared this with you briefly in December 21 during Finance and Ops Committee meeting and included it as part of the President's recommended supplemental 2022 state budget request. Dean Brian Burr and I testified before both House and Senate Higher Ed committees, and he testified on this project specifically with great interest from our legislators, because this is an incredibly exciting opportunity for a public-private partnership that represents not only a really key component of the Mintersection's commitment in Impact 2025, and specifically our goals to develop and deploy new techniques and partnerships for smart farming and sustainable food supplies and natural resources, but broadly to expand, develop, and retain agricultural and food system talent in rural communities and in agribusiness. This is also a catalyst to significantly advance and contribute to Minnesota's $112 billion, with a B, annual economic impact in the food and agricultural sector. So the vision for FARM is to create a state-of-the-art animal agricultural teaching and research complex in Mower County, which will then create unmatched preparation for students as they work towards productive careers, a platform for new discoveries that will benefit people around the world, and an engine that will drive strong economic outcomes for all of us here in Minnesota. Dean Brian Burr will go into greater detail on this. He is, of course, the Dean of the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences, and we're very grateful for his vision and his work and the relationships that he and the foundation have developed in order to make all of this possible. And so with that, I'm very happy to turn it over to the Dean, Madam Chair.
Wonderful, thank you. And Dean Burr, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair Davenport. It is exciting to be here today. As you'll see, as you walk out of here, if you follow the news feeds, we actually did announce today that this is occurring across Minnesota, so it's exciting to see that. And I do want to thank all of you and President Gable for your support of this initiative through the capital funding request to the legislature. That's a key milestone, of course. And today, as Vice President Oaks was talking about, it's all about public-private partnerships. And this clearly sends a signal to Minnesota that we are about how do we sustain the competitiveness of Minnesota's agricultural sector and businesses and communities across greater Minnesota. So we're really excited to be a part of this. It really is a team effort across things. And I think there'll be a lot of elements with Dr. Oaks's comments that you'll hear come into this. I almost think that as NC fans were kind of applied in addition to theoretical. Well, this is the applied version. This is putting it on the ground and trying to move forward with some really exciting research opportunities, include public-private partnerships. It does, of course, fit in with Impact 2025. And we're just talking, Vice President Oaks was just talking about place-based research, but from a Mintersection standpoint, we fit squarely into the Mintersection on advancing the resource and agri-food systems to elevate human security and potential for Minnesota. We've been doing this roughly at a global leader for about 130 years. Certainly this makes a leapfrog type investment to move us and keep us forward in that. And to give an example, as President Gable was just talking about, the $112 billion in economics value of agriculture, there's a huge R&D research return on investment to these activities. So for example, I always use grapes because we don't think of grapes as being a huge industry. We develop cold-hardy grapes, get the Itasca grape wine. It's fantastic. It's close to a Chardonnay. But we developed grapes, and already over the last 10 years or so, the annual returns to Minnesota from that is about $1 billion a year. As you think about tourism that's been stimulated by vineyards, you think about the actual wines themselves, that's the kind of return on investment we have from these sorts of activities. And that's part of the Mintersection's goal to advance those further. And that's not even mentioning our vast, other agricultural aspects of it. The vision for farm, which you can read here, I won't go through that, but I do want to emphasize some of the remarks that Dr. Oakes was making about place-based research. And in Minnesota, CFANS operates, many of you will be familiar with some of them, 10 research and outreach centers across Minnesota. And the biggest contract is probably if you go to Northeast Minnesota, where we have the Cloquet Forestry Research Center, which obviously is related to forest research, but that's due to the environment, frankly, the forests of Northeast Minnesota and the timber industry, forest product development and so on that are part of that strategy. So the Southwest, where you're hard pressed to find a tree, but you have a high plains arid region. That's not our fault. That was here before you. But you'll find that high plain arid type region of agriculture has different soil characteristics. It's fairly arid, some irrigation potential with it. And our place-based research really aligns to what are the needs of the various regions of Minnesota. And I'll emphasize that that's becoming more critical than it ever was, even from 150 years ago, because you think of the land as being fixed in place, of course, but the climate's moving over that land. We're now moving that climate northward from the south to north in terms of its warming, precipitation. And so those research enterprises, we have 100 years of information on. We know what was done on those lands is incredibly valuable for advancing how this impacts the various regions of Minnesota, and it can be applied in those communities. So it really emphasizes that those are irreplaceable resources as we think about them, because you simply can't gather that data again. You can't go back in time and replicate what was being done there and what's happening. And so this helps to move that and continue that forward using advanced innovation technologies to do that. Another aspect of that is that many of our assets, when we talk about animal agriculture and this, are near their end of life stage. They're simply not representative of what our current agricultural industries are using today. So from the standpoint of research and talent development, developing students who are prepared to work in those advanced modern systems, this contributes to that advancement as well. Give you a little background, because this comes out of the blue a bit to some people. We've been planning this for actually 6 to 7 years. None of these just happen overnight. And the genesis of it was a legislative initiative for the Dairy Authority, which was actually originally done to advance the dairy research side of things. As we explored that on the St. Paul campus, we discovered that the costs were prohibitive. You can imagine, as I say, raising livestock in the heart of the Twin Cities is a relatively difficult thing to do. And so and the costs associated with that. So we started to form partnerships across the state, as we always do. And working with industry and business, we started to develop this vision that was a broader scope. And actually that depreciation leads a little bit to opportunities where you can replace those assets and recapitalize. One of those partnerships that we're really excited about is Riverland Community College. And I came from a background, I didn't go to community college, but from a rural area. Our educational systems probably weren't as great as some students get in the Twin Cities. And this is a terrific opportunity for us to partner throughout a vertical as we think about in agriculture. And I was hoping that President Anuga would join us today. He was unable to do that. Unfortunately, we had planned to have him here, and he could do a much better job of this. But certainly at the time we were investigating this, Riverland College was expressing a vision for how they do agricultural research and thinking about developing that next generation of talent. And I happen to know President Anuga from previous engagements we'd had. And so we started to have a conversation about how can we advance this in a way where we would have a fully integrated system of education go with it. So we're delighted to have a key partner in this, in addition to our business and industry partners that are part of this as well. The project itself takes a One Health approach. So as I said, we started out with the Dairy Authority, which was focused on dairy. As we're learning from our science, and as you look at some of the integrated science design we're working on, from biology to engineering, our modern agriculture and abilities to measure and understand complex interactions across that sector create new advancements for us to think about what are the intersections between animal health, soil health, what happens to our environmental outcomes, how does it affect the health of people? And we're able to, through molecular genetics, genomics, the advanced data analytics and robotic systems we have, to really integrate that together and understand that complex system and think about how do we actually, and we are doing this in some cases, regenerating our natural resources through the way we advance agriculture. And so by having this opportunity to completely reinvest in an integrated system, we're advancing something that nobody else that we are aware of when we did our feasibility was thinking of doing this in agricultural systems. And that's created a lot of excitement among companies that provide if you think about a dairy, for example, and they're providing robotic milkers, they're providing the equipment, the computers and so on that operate in that system. Those companies are interested, as well as the farmers, thinking about how do we take these technologies and apply them into our farming operations and get the greatest advantage from that. So this One Health integrated science really does build this sort of frontier edge type research, partnering with industry across the spectrum, from the farmer on up through the major agribusinesses that help support our agriculture systems. The second piece to this, and I mentioned this briefly when I was talking about Riverland Community College, is the vertical education strategy we have. And so we call it a vertical because one of the foresights that recently Hormel Corporation had was they're providing tuition to students in Austin and Mower County to go advance their higher education goals. So we have this as the outer circle is global outreach. So today, as you can imagine, very few people are engaged actually in agriculture. And this element of how do we explain to the general public who's very concerned about how their food is produced, what the environmental consequences of it are, what are the technology impacts, what about animal welfare? This starts to think about how do we start to have that conversation in a way that brings science, facts, and objective information so we can understand that, which builds and supports the industry. And then we think about how do we also advance our primary, secondary education. If you're going to build that talent pipeline, we're finding you need to start about that 6th, 7th, 8th grade middle school type timing. And so this brings an opportunity to bring those kids into an area where they can start to learn about it as well. Of course, Riverland is the key gateway for 2-year associate's degrees. And again, I work with an organization in Mankato, Minnesota, Green Seam, which is a consortium of agribusiness and community leaders across southern Minnesota advancing agriculture, and other boards similar to that. And what I hear consistently is finding if you're a farmer now and you're operating your tractor, you're basically an IT engineer as much as you are a person driving a tractor. You know, how do you manage the technologies, innovations, the real-time analysis coming in on that? They need students who are trained in that. And Riverland is excellent at developing those skills for students to come out and have those advanced careers. Of course, we're looking at how do we develop the undergrads, the advanced leaders in that area, as well as our graduate students who'll be working on this site to develop research. And I will mention in this, there's been a concern expressed as we've been advancing this about students at the University of Minnesota having opportunity to engage with animals. We're committed to having animals on site on St. Paul campus, which is another one of those rumors I hear in greater Minnesota they don't have access to. We have animals literally a block away from the dormitories on the St. Paul campus. And so part of animal science is always the actual working with animals themselves, understanding the handling, care, and you know, anatomy, for example, of animals. Vet Med uses our animals for research purposes and blood draws as we do, for example. We will have those animals there for that process. What this builds is a site where we can bring state-of-the-art technologies and innovation and systems that are engaged in that to the students as well. So we're planning for that transition as a way to do that. And I think it's really critical to understand we are committed to supporting that agricultural education component wherever it is in place and types of facilities. I've already talked about this quite a bit, and in the interest of time, I think I'll move. I've used the word leapfrog quite a bit, but I think one of the key elements is we are at a time where, because of information technologies and innovation, we have the ability to leapfrog into some technologies in agriculture that we see on the frontiers that are happening in practice. So these 3 hubs are really, you know, animal health, nutrition. We actually include, oddly enough, humans in that. We have research actually right now in our integrated animal systems biology, looking at how gut microbiome of animals as a model for human health and nutrition, and how important the microbiome is to immunity, how we digest food, how we process different foods. And so that intersection that bridges that One Health is a key part of that pillar. The integrated resilient farming systems is about the stresses that we have related to environmental challenges, whether that's drier weather, hotter weather, pest invasive species coming on. How do we create resilient systems that actually rejuvenate and regenerate the natural resources? And of course, digital autonomous agriculture is a key part of that as well. Of course, a lot of what the University of Minnesota does, as Vice President Oakes was saying again, this is really about competitiveness of Minnesota in the global economy. You know, how do we advance the education and research to do that? So as we were doing our feasibility study on farm, we looked at the economic impacts of it. As President Gable said, it will be located and planned to be located in Mower County. Each year, this operation will have $18 million in direct economic impacts for Minnesota. So that extends beyond Mower County. That's employment, that's the inputs we have to operating it. And the other yellow box on this slide is the total multiplier impact of that, which is just the operations from the jobs and secondary spillovers it has in the economy. So it does have a substantial impact for Minnesota. And of course, as I was talking about earlier with the grapes example, you can imagine the ROI that comes out of this for competitiveness in agriculture and innovation there as well. So with that, just to wrap up, this is sort of our timeline on this project. We're moving aggressively, and our University of Minnesota capital planning and has been helping tremendously on this process. So we completed our feasibility. That feasibility, which demonstrated that it was a feasible project to work through, and the vision for it was validated. That led to the investor pledge from Hormel Foundation of $60 million in support of it. That pledge depends, of course, on site preparation. We need to do a pre-design, the usual development work we do on projects. And pending the approval of that, which will start in September of 2022, we're already doing the groundwork planning for that. Then at the point where we get the site selected, which we're also working on now, we're in the process of working through that and making good progress. Actually, there's quite a bit of transition occurring in land ownership and so on. And so we'll be working towards that. And as that falls into place, that'll be our next step towards getting that pledge. And the last step, of course, is we're looking and working already with industry partners, both from the standpoint, as Dr. Oakes was talking about, investment in the process, but we do a lot of joint research with industry. We don't go into a vacuum and say, you know, here's what we're going to do, don't you like it? We actually engage with industry in common conversations about what are the research needs, what are the opportunities, and that goes from, again, the farmers, so some of the multinational companies we work with on food development, as well as agricultural systems. And ultimately, when we meet that stage, it's about 60 months till completion. So we're moving forward as quickly as we can. We're excited about the capital request from the legislature because that's an opportunity to really move this forward to the next stages. And with that, I'll turn it back. So Regent Davenport, thank you.
Thank you, Dean Burr. And I think pairing these presentation works because, again, demonstrating how visions come together, they align toward the greater good. And we saw that Austin was an example of regional innovation. Of course, we have the Hormel Institute down there and with Riverland's work, and we thank the Hormel Foundation for their key role in this partnership as we move forward. And I'm excited about this. We'll start our questions with Regent Powell. And we'll need to have you unmute yourself. Thank you.
It wouldn't be a Zoom thing if I was not being. Dean Burr, look, congratulations on all the work that your team has done to advance this initiative, and especially on today when you're making an announcement. It's really terrific. So I have a couple of questions really around economics. And I think there are I'll frame them as two questions. The first one is, so this is designed, I guess in the end to attract, research funding. And could you just talk a little bit about that? I mean, is it expected that that'll be a combination of U.S. Department of Agriculture grants and industry grants, but maybe give us a feel for the funding streams that you anticipate. And as you talk about that, I think there's an expectation we're going to try to raise a couple $100 million here over the next few years. We've had the downstroke from the Hormel Foundation. Is that, money really going to primarily dedicated to building physical infrastructure, or will that become an endowment, or how will that work? The second question has to do with, the sort of questions of economics and business that sort of surround the kind of work you're going to do. At the end of the day, farming, it's an enterprise, it's a business, and there's a lot of change coming at the farming industry. Some of it could be quite challenging. Are we going to have economists and Carlson people and kind of on the team there, so that we're evaluating the economics of the ideas that are going to come out of the Institute, from the perspective of the farmers. So long-winded, couple of questions. Thanks for a great presentation and congratulations.
Dean Burr.
Regent Davenport, Regent Regent Powell. Good questions. And so from the first question from the funding strategy, as part of the feasibility, we did look at the entire portfolio of what the funding strategy is. And as you mentioned, it includes, of course, and we're grateful for the starting point with the Hormel Foundation in this. So there's the philanthropic component. And so we're engaging in that as well for additional funds. The second piece are the industry partnerships element. So we're talking with several firms that are engaged, both, as I was saying, in the standpoint of they're actually equipment and building design firms. And they're interested in doing this from a research perspective, where it helps to support their research goals as well. So for example, in many cases, one we're working with who does robotics in dairy, their challenge is they have uncontrolled variation within their dairy sites, right? They have 3,000 some farms that are part of their system, and yet they can't control for some of the variables they're observing come out in the data. So this provides a platform for them to have a controlled site where we're maintaining those controls in animals at different stages that you can start to address those. And that's just an example of the type of work that we're looking at, those industry partnerships. And quite honestly, if you looked across, one of our elements is, I think some people find this a little bit overwhelming. And I always remind them, we operate 10 of these research sites already that have similar partnerships. And that gets to our third element to this. We are looking at, right now we operate just from the pure operations perspective, and that is actually part of the Impact 2025 is operational effectiveness efficiency, is we now run 5 different sites for our animal systems operations, one being St. Paul and the others being across the state. There are redundancies with those. So for example, with livestock, you have the animal, so one's a beef operation, for example. That beef operation still has to have feed handling equipment, tractors, equipment for manure handling and so on. We've got that replicated on a dairy site in Morris. And so bringing this together, we actually financially have done, to your question about the economics management, we've done that assessment. Just a brief reminder, I'm an ag economist. I've worked with large scale commercial ag systems my entire career. Some of them are leading pork production companies in Minnesota. So we've been around this barn before, as I say sometimes. But we're looking at actually that business model, and was part of the feasibility, and to look at both the capital investment cost, the operations costs, and the continued operations of it. And that's one of the elements of Hormel's pledge, is that we have a business model that's sustainable through time. And quite honestly, we've struggled with that in our current operations, and I don't want to put that on somebody else or the university. So we're really looking at having this be a viable, long-term, sustainable business model. And so we're looking at that as well.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Regent Sviggum.
Madam Chair, thank you. Dean Burr, I want to give you my congratulations and my kudos to you, to Kathy Schmidlkoffer and her team, and especially to our president, President Gable, for the outreach to Hormel. This is really, really big. This is really significant, and thank you for your work in this area. It's really important to Minnesota. 2 comments, if I could, Dean Burr. The first is, could you explain for us a little bit of the relationship with Riverland College and the relationship, the cooperation, the research that'll be done there? I have, for 3 or 4 years in this board, tried to push our relationship with Minnesota State in a much stronger direction, unsuccessfully. So I'm very, very interested in the relationship with Riverland, if you could.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, as you pull this together in the next 60 months, since we do have experiment stations already, 10 I think you mentioned, but I'm aware of most of them. As we become more efficient and as we try to do things in maybe a more efficient, condensed area way, there's going to be some inevitable jealousies. There's going to be some inevitable parochial concerns, local pressures from maybe those existing 10 sites. I encourage you to be bold, to do it efficiently, and I, for one, will stand behind you strongly with any decisions you make that might have to be done with some of the other experiment stations as we move forward in Monmouth County. And then lastly, just make sure that in the animal research, nothing is done for turkeys. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank
I
you.
gotta pick on hips sometime, don't I?
And Regent Sviggum, it is a good partnership with Riverland, and you've schooled us on silos. I think President Adewaligan could school you on silos down the road. Any comment?
Well, I had 2 questions in there.
Yes, two.
Not the turkey thing. The 2.
Okay, Chair Davenport, Regent Spigum. Thank you for your support. Really do appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. President Gable's been tremendously supportive of this and very helpful in doing that, and particularly putting it towards the legislative session. To your two questions, the relationship with Riverland, that actually goes back farther than people think. One of the things we've done in CFANS for years, we have the Farm Business Management Associations, if you're familiar with those. And so those go across several two-year schools. So we work with South Central College in Mankato, Riverland College in Austin, we're talking about Central Lakes College up north towards Regent Hipsch areas. We work with Ridgewater College. So it's by dint of that, we have relationships. And that's where I first actually met President Anuga, was through the Farm Business Management Associations and their faculty there. That was actually what led to this conversation when we started having this. I was talking about, oh, we're working on this project. They were working on the Center for Agriculture, Food Science, and Technology that I mentioned in the slides. And so that led us to deeper conversations about, are there ways for us to think about aligning two-year students into the University of Minnesota? And we haven't done this yet, mainly because of COVID, and we didn't get it further, but this will be part of it. We were actually going to put an advisor into Riverland College for students who are thinking about continuing their education here at the university, so that those students would have the preparation specifically towards our programs. So we would essentially have funded the advisor and put them there. So that partnership goes from our extension outreach part of this dual part to the research element, which will be applied research, and then also the student relationship. So, and President Anuga himself, I think what Regent Davenport was referring to is he's an ag engineer by training. So he's pretty excited about the opportunity to work with us and partner there as well. A third party link in that, most of you are probably familiar with the Ag Utilization Research Institute. They were also working with Riverland. We work with ARI. So we triangulate a lot of those interactions. So it's a very exciting partnership. One other piece I'll mention there, because people talk about the location decision quite a bit. And we thought pretty carefully about that, but there's two geographic features that are really interesting. We always work with our regional land grant universities too. So the Iowa State, South Dakota State, Wisconsin. If you put a map in Mower County where this is, we're not quite equidistant between those three other land grant partners, but we're pretty close. And so we look at it as an opportunity. And so we sort of remove the pride of ownership, to your point about the competition that occurs between organizations. We sort of have it in a neutral territory, right? Everyone else has their facilities. Nobody has an integrated facility like this. The idea is to draw them into that. And of course, 35 and 90 go right through that intersection as well. So we're hoping that it becomes a regional asset with that too. And with Riverland, we have opportunities to do that as well. Your second question were the research and outreach centers across the state. And we've been very clear that we're looking at, this is a recapitalization effort. It is looking to take the capital we have that's in depreciated assets and move that towards a new investment. So for example, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just in maintenance and repairs on facilities that really we're just keeping going to be able to keep animals. The decision every farmer makes, at what point do you replace, at what point do you fix? We're well beyond the point of continuing to fix those facilities. That becomes free cash flow into this new system. We also, of course, will have land associated. We are doing crop research here. That will certainly reduce the land footprint required in other places. And that'll be a conversation we'll want to have with the Board of Regents and others. As a previous president once informed me, the land belongs to the Board of Regents as much as the people that work the land like to think it's theirs. It's not. And so we're thinking about how do we strategically redeploy that capital as well. Because there are lands, when I talk about the place-based, that's irreplaceable. How much do you need in any given location to accomplish the research you have? Helps you, and we're actually doing that analysis right now. We have one of our faculty members in applied economics is working on enterprise analysis of each of those sites to determine what's the cost structures of each operation, what are the capital structures, how can we redeploy that into new investment as well. So there's a fairly deep integrated financial component with this.
Regent Sviggum?
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Regent Farnsworth next, and then Hibsch, Rocha, and Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. I'll be really quick. Just wanted to say thank you for this and express my excitement about this project. Agriculture is certainly not my area of expertise, but I've been listening and trying to learn as much as possible with great interest, and appreciate listening to the feedback and comments of other board colleagues as well. Also wanted to highlight, as several folks have, the feature of this in our presentations to the legislature. I was listening earlier this week to both of those with great interest and think this is exactly Of course, there's so many things we could be highlighting and so much great work, particularly involving, our legislative pieces, but I thought this was definitely the right project to put forward there, and appreciated seeing the excitement from legislators as well. Thanks also to committee leadership for kind of making this day about partnership and engagement. Clearly get the theme here. So this is really exciting work in our agriculture area, and just want to express that and thank you for that.
Thank you, Regent Farnsworth. Regent Hinch.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So I really love this again. It seems like this is a day of love of stuff, but to me, it's not that important where it's located as that it's located in the state. I mean, that research is so important. Like you talked about robotics and dairy cows. You can do the research down in southeast Minnesota, but in my hometown of Perm, we process 4 million pounds of milk every day and make 400,000 pounds of cheese at Bongards Creamery. And we use recycled steam from burning garbage, and Dean Beer was up there and he saw it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we use recycled steam from 5 counties garbage to provide the energy to make the milk, process the milk. And so it's super important that we have the cows. And the one thing that we're missing that we can't stay competitive on is dairy production if we don't have good facilities and good equipment. And the research has to be specific to the state. So that's what's really exciting about this, because it takes agriculture and animal agriculture into the next, into the future again. And a lot of the barns and a lot of the production facilities are antiquated and they are being updated. So the timing is perfect for this right now. And so I commend the dean and the staff and everybody that's involved in this, because it's really, really important for the state. So thank you.
Thank you, Regent Hips. Again, that collaborative partnership is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So appreciate the presentation, Dean Boer. It was, you kind of walked right through all the questions that you've answered for me in the past. When this first came up, being a St. Paul campus graduate, a College of Ag graduate, back in the day, very interested in how this would impact the experience for students on campus, and how this would impact animal activities on campus, and was thoroughly convinced by your presentation or your communication to me prior to this meeting and through this dialogue as well, that it's going to be a massive improvement, I believe. I tend to look at at this process. I mean, our colleagues here have talked about the other experiment stations and the research component and collaboration. I don't know that I need to say anything more about that. I think that's been very well covered. But I look at it through this lens of how it impacts our ability to educate the next generation in this range, because it does have an impact on that. I do think that we have always had a special challenge with our College of Agriculture, now CFANS, being in the middle of a major metropolitan area. You've heard the quotes, you can't grow corn on concrete, and other things that have been used to sort of leverage students not coming to our College of Ag and going to some of the surrounding states as part of the challenge for keeping our numbers up. I think this is a really nice opportunity to stand out. And I don't know if, we haven't talked a whole lot about this, Dean Boer, but how we can really maximize and leverage and maximize the ability for our undergraduate students in particular, as well as our graduate students, in having access to what is certain to provide cutting edge technology for the agricultural issues in our state. As Regent Hips talked about, we're a very large state. We have very diverse agriculture. This is obviously in one location. That happens to be my old home area, which brings me some pleasure to know that the university is going to have an even greater presence in the area. But just if you could, talk a little bit about how we can use this to maximize the experience for our undergraduate students to try to, perhaps reverse the trend a little bit in the decline in our agricultural student population, and really, again, make ourselves stand out amongst the peers in our national region, to be the best of the best, which we've prided ourselves in being for over a century.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. You cut out there just a little bit. I think you're asking about maximizing the undergraduate experience, and especially as we key in on some of the competitiveness within ag education.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's a great synopsis. It's, how do we, taking this and really turning around what's been a kind of a critical approach from the community at times to making this, reflect the fact that we are really the most attractive location for people if they want to pursue a career in agriculture.
Dean Burr.
Yeah. Chair Davenport, Regent Rocha, thanks for that question. It's a really important question for us because we do, of course, our students first sort of approach to things. And one of the exciting parts about it is, and we've had concerns expressed about what do we do with the resident students here on the St. Paul campus. So continuing the ability to have access to animals, what they gain is the state-of-the-art facilities and sort of the technology part of that. The second piece, which actually is a intersection piece, I'll segue to, is the next gen med that was discussed, the next gen ag piece that was discussed. And one of the things we've been doing, actually this spring, we're piloting, we're in the midst of a pilot of delivering experiential online courses to our research and outreach centers. So Regent Rocha, Lamberton is our experimental site. And what we did is we of course have labs and fields there. So we offered an introductory soils course with a fantastic Nick Jelensky, he's the faculty member. He's really compelling. He's been an officer in the military, extraordinary person. He worked internationally in soils. He put his course online, and we have enrollees from the high school in Southwest Minnesota. We have members of the Soil Conservation Service there, and we have people taking undergraduate degree credits in that class. And while they're taking the class and lectures and so on are coming in online, they're able to go to our research and outreach center. I think he has 4 times planned where they can go out into the fields and do soil testing this spring. They're doing some water research and how do nutrients move into water, so they can go and sample out of tiles the water quality issues. And so they can actually have that same experience that our students are having here in some of those labs on campus. And we're going to try to deploy that within the farm project as well. So an early stage of trying to give accessibility, and what we're seeing is the technology, and take the Soil Conservation Service professionals that are in this, the demands and testing technologies are moving so rapidly. We're able to help, through both extension, but now also a broader coursework do that work. And so Regent Rocha, we give a much better quality experience in terms of the facilities and the technology side of this, as well as being able to deliver both on campus as well as those off campus. And so we think this is a great chance to build that part in by design too. We're sort of retrofitting Lamberton to do it. So hopefully that answered your question.
Regent Rocha.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just say, if you're going to be making a lot of trips down to the Boston area, Dean Boer, I'm an alumnus of the pizza delivery crew at Nick's Pizza in Otana. If you'd like some coupons, I can see if I can get some.
I'll take you up on that. Thank you. And Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport and Dean Burr. Thank you for your presentation. I want to add my great enthusiasm for this project. I've been a resident of southeastern Minnesota my entire adult life since I moved to 21 to Rochester. I'm also a 5th generation Minnesotan who has relatives who are in the turkey business, right, Doug? I think competitors, but that's okay. So I'm really interested in that. I just want to say I think Austin is a fantastic place. Just to picture, this is a city of 25,000 in southeastern Minnesota. It is at that intersection of I-35 and I-90. It's got great centrality there, but the Hormel Institute's fantastic. They've got an excellent Riverland College. It's a great place to do this, and I'm very enthused about what this can do for the community and for the state, and then even to consider this as something of a model that we might be able to use in other places to grow some agricultural process. But I'm very, very enthusiastic about that, and really appreciate your work and the work that's going forward. We'll be interested to see how this evolves.
Thank you. And a big thank you to the Hormel Institute and our other collaborative partners in this project. And again, I think I speak for everyone to say that we look forward to hearing progress on this project as it gets rolling. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. Good presentations this morning. Thank you for your engagement, everyone. We come now to the consent report, and I'll ask Provost Croson to provide a brief introduction to the items in the consent report. And while she does that, please let me know if you have a question or comment or wish to separate any item to be considered separately. Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, members of the board. This consent report is presented today for your consideration with my and the president's recommendation for approval. As is typical, it includes new and changed academic programs, and in this case, one tenured hire. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? See none. I would ask for a motion to approve the consent report.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The consent report is approved. Next, our information items, Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, members of the board. The information items in your February docket includes our regular report of select student, faculty, and staff accomplishments, as well as one of our required legislative reports. Additionally, you will see an update on test requirements for admission for the incoming class of fall 2023. I look forward to discussing this topic in more depth at a later date as we work to make a long-term decision about this facet of our admissions criteria. This concludes my report. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Provost Croson, and congratulations to you. Those of you who read your packet know that Provost Croson and colleagues were recognized by the American Association for Advancement of Science. So, and also I'd like to give a special thanks to Dr. Toller and his staff in the medical school for their thorough report of the Chloe Barnes Advisory Council on Rare Diseases, as well as the oversight and coordination of the council. The legislature created this back just a couple of years ago, 2019, and this is a tremendous step forward ensuring Minnesotans with rare diseases that they have access to timely diagnoses, expert coordinated care, as well as individualized treatment and support throughout their lifespan, as outlined in the group's vision and mission that you read. And we have student Butire. Question, please.
Chair Davenport, Provost Croson. I had a comment about the extension of the test optional admissions. And I understand you're talking about this at a later time as well, but on a graduate and professional school level, are there existing conversations or encouraged discussions about also considering or making entrance exams optional for the upcoming academic years, given barriers to access and availability related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and more largely existing equity issues around graduate and professional school entrance exams?
Chair Davenport, Representative Buttar, thank you for the question. Here at the university, graduate and professional admissions criteria are delegated to the colleges or the departments which are appropriate. I know there are numerous discussions going on around this very topic, but of course those discussions are nuanced by the requirements, the accreditation requirements, and the other constraints that each of those disciplines face. So the short answer is yes, there are discussions, but there is not a uniform policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Regent Farnsworth.
Thank you, Chair Davenport and Provost Croson. I wanted to pick up on the extension of UMTC test optional admissions too, and just say thank you for that. I know you and I have had conversations about this before. It's a nice follow-up, I think, to the conversation we had at a previous board retreat. And this is something I'm supportive of. I think it increases access and opportunity for the students we need to continue to strive to serve. So just wanted to highlight that and say thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? There being none, thank you everyone for a great meeting, and we stand adjourned.